founder of Human.
Yes.
And also the founder and chairman of your Kairos Society.
Yes.
And Kairos, I know, ranks the largest student-owned and run businesses in the world, and comes out with a list. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you're working these days.
Right. So if you take a look actually at what we were trying to solve with Kairos and kind of how we got into that whole world, we basically realized that we're living in one of the most fascinating times where technology is growing at an exponential rate. And we've just hit the knee of the curve where industries are going to be disrupted not every 2 or 3 years, but every 6 months or less.
Okay.
So the question that we were trying to figure out is, how do we actually get entrepreneurs to focus on solving some of these big problems? And how do we get the largest companies of today to actually stay relevant in solving the problems as we know them?
Okay.
And what we found is that there's actually a phenomenal synergy in understanding how to pair these two worlds together, something that has been typically very spread out. So these large corporations, many of the members in your organization, have a very solid insight into what the biggest needs are in the market over the next few years, even the next year, 2 years, 3 years.
Sure.
What they don't necessarily know is what the solution is going to look like, because solutions are now coming from industries completely outside their world. Right? The healthcare industry is going to be disrupted by somebody in the data world or somebody in the hardware world or somebody that had never played in the healthcare space before.
Okay.
And you're seeing this happen in education everywhere else. So our thought was, what if we could actually, on one hand, give focus to entrepreneurs? Because as an entrepreneur, the biggest challenge is always figuring out exactly what the problem that the market needs, and you're testing constantly, and it takes time and effort. So if we can give the best and brightest of the next generation a focus, and let them as non-experts figure out what would that solution look like, and then team them back with the infrastructure of these large companies, we can bring radically disruptive solutions to markets really fast.
Okay, so the college environment in particular, the university, the business school environments, those would be the areas that, I guess from your perspective, would germinate some of the potential solutions to these big business and corporate challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, and it's really market challenges more than business challenges. But what's so unique about the college environment is that you've got incredibly bright minds that have yet to be trained of what should work or shouldn't work. And so you get these uninhibited approach to solving big problems. And so rather than trying to solve problems incrementally, like with mobile healthcare, it's not about creating a telemedicine, artificial intelligence. They can look at it and say, well, why don't we create an Uber for doctors? And that's how we get anybody access to healthcare at any time of the day, no matter where they are. Let's crowdsource it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Tell us a bit about Human.
So in short, we realized that as technology becomes exponential, so does data. And the place that's affected us, I think, the most is in handling our own relationships. We have an influx of thousands of contacts, of friends, of people we're meeting. How do we actually keep track of this and create anything meaningful out of these relationships? Sure. So we've now built what we call the first personal assistant for your relationships that allows you to keep all of your contacts in one place without the duplicates, up-to-date information, and actually build identities around not only who these contacts are, but how you know them. And so now you can automatically keep track of people you're meeting. So who was it that I met last night at the World Innovation Forum, and find that contact. Or when you're trying to connect with somebody, you say, who was it that works at Google? The way our brains naturally think, can you find the relationships that you have that actually match what you're looking for? And then understand that even a step further, so when you're trying to reach somebody, we can identify which of your contacts can make the most trusted introduction.
Okay, sure.
Right?
Okay.
And what's interesting is the only way you're able to do this is by actually understanding real identity. Okay. And so we're the first company to actually map out all this social information to real-world public record identities. So even if I just meet you and get your phone number, I can understand all the ways that you might be relevant to my life right away.
Okay. What have you learned about business, about hierarchies, about the potential of social media, of a new generation of leaders coming up, that senior executives, the senior executive who's sitting in that role today,
right?
How might they benefit from what you've already learned?
So I think the biggest insight that we found is that the goal in innovating and creating products for tomorrow is not to think outside the box, but to think inside a different box.
Okay.
Because when you actually tackle a problem from a totally different perspective, that's when you start making these connections that seem so obvious to you, and yet so innovative to the industry today. So if you ask an innovator, are they innovative, they'll always say no, right? It's just obvious to them. And people are always trying to teach innovation, but there's really nothing to teach. It's just a matter of looking at problems from different lenses and making connections that didn't exist.
I'm guessing you're not. I'm guessing that one wouldn't be handicapped by a whole set of assumptions about resources and systems and structures and. Is that it?
Well, I mean, I think that, people always, I think, get hung up on capital as the biggest inhibitor for innovation. But I think at the end of the day, capital will come, right? There's so much money sitting on the sidelines today. The point is, how do we focus it on areas where we know there's big global needs? And the reason people have capital problems is because they're guessing at what the market wants.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so if we can focus on a known global challenge, a global problem, the money is there.
Okay. Last question would be, is there a big challenge or is there a crisis out there in the global business landscape that you see that you're most optimistic can be changed or influenced by some of the revelations that you've seen?
Well, I think the most interesting thing happening, like I said, is that technology is coming out at such a rapid pace today that it's going to, for the first time, actually force companies into this open innovation environment.
Okay.
Where in the past you could ignore it and take time, and if you adopted something 2 years later, it was still okay. We're going to start to filter very quickly over the next 5 years. I think that it's going to be, I'm actually optimistic because for the first time, I think you'll get the infrastructure and resources of the largest companies working with the brightest minds from all over the world. And as 3 billion people come online in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be able to tap into innovation and knowledge at an unprecedented rate.
Okay.
And I'm quite excited about that.
Well, great. Terrific. Ankur Jain, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.